Eyes on the prize, discipline, and third, an example. So first, eyes on the prize. Paul is writing to the Corinthians in our first reading. And the Corinthians, Corinth was a place, the Corinthians were really competitive. Is anybody competitive here? I know there's a lot of competitive. And there's others that not too, that's okay. But the Corinthians, they were really competitive. They hosted what was something like the Olympics in their town, about every other year. And one of the main competitions in their Olympics was a foot race. And so Paul knows this, and so he's making a metaphor, and he's describing the Christian walk, our walk with God, serving God and our neighbors like an athlete. Okay, and he says, run so as to win. Run so as to win. And I'm like, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I went out to Prospect Park and saw a number of you who are on the cross-country team and saw Coach Darrow there, and everyone's running it. And I'm like, what would you do if you're running the race and you're not trying to win? Paul goes on to say, he says, don't run aimlessly. So as I walked up on top of the hill, on Prospect Hill, so I could see everyone kind of running, I just imagined like if I saw Anna or Peyton out there as they're running and they're just aimlessly kind of just running like this. No, they wouldn't be running so as to win. They've got to keep their eye on the prize. They got to keep their eye on the finish mark and not just be out there kind of aimlessly looking around. And so what does he say? There's intentionality that's needed. I need to go this direction, keep my eyes on the prize. Intentionality is needed, boys and girls, for us to live the Christian life, for us to be good boys and girls, for us to serve God and serve our neighbors, which leads us to discipline. Again, Paul's talking about athletes here, and he says, every athlete exercises discipline in every way. He says, I drive my body and I train it. Discipline. Athletes sacrifice things. They do things that they don't want to do at times so as to get better, to get stronger, so as to win the race. There's times when you're training maybe for the race. There's times when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed and work out this morning, but I do it anyways. Paul says how much more important that is as it relates to the spiritual life. He says, for they compete for a perishable crown, a trophy. What's going to happen to a trophy in 100 years? Are you going to care about the trophy? No, ultimately the trophy's going to just corrode and it's going to turn into, I don't know what trophies turn into, but it's going to turn into something where you're just not going to care about it. Paul says we have an imperishable crown, one that's not going to waste away, and that is life with Jesus. See, boys and girls, and Paul says it takes discipline. So as much as athletes train the body to win the race, we need to train ourselves in the Christian life. Maybe even doing things sometimes that we don't want to do. Like maybe sometimes in the morning, I kind of have the same thing in the morning sometimes with waking up and praying. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed right now and go to the chapel. How much more Paul says it's important to do that than it is even working out. And service of others. But discipline and training. I was walking in the hallways yesterday and it was upstairs and it was the fourth grade and Troy came out, he saw me, he was at his locker and he says, Father Mark, come inside real quick. We want to show you something. And I walk into the classroom and everyone's standing at their desk and Mrs. Walsh says, go ahead on the count of 3. And what did they do? They recited from memory Jeremiah 29:13. It says, for when you see, I may not get it right, your translation. For when you seek me, you will find me. When you seek me with all your heart, I will always come and find you. Something like that, right, boys and girls? I will be found by you. Thank you. Jeremiah 29:13. Does it take discipline and work to memorize that? Yeah, it does. It does. But there's importance to that. More importance even than winning a trophy or disciplining ourselves for running the race. Because sometimes we need to know that the Lord is searching after me when maybe I'm struggling, that he's always trying to find me, and all I have to do is just seek him out, and he's always there. And lastly, boys and girls, an example for us real quick. Today we celebrate St. Peter Claver. He was a Jesuit priest. He was born in Spain, but he was ordained in Colombia, in South America. And he was a guy who would stand at the port when ships would come from Africa with a boat full of thousands of slaves. And he would stand at the port, and as soon as that boat got to the dock, he would run into the boat as other people would run away, because inside the boat it smelled bad, because those slaves were not treated very well. They weren't treated very well for a number of different reasons. One of them was because of the color of their skin. And so Peter Claver ran in there and he did a number of things. One thing he did was he just gave them food first. Second thing he did, he taught them that they have dignity of life, that every single person, doesn't matter how old they are, doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter the color of their skin. He says, you have dignity, you have worth. And he healed them when he explained that. And then the third thing he did, he gave them the life-saving news of the gospel. Boys and girls, Peter Claver was a guy who kept his eyes on the prize, Jesus. He served Jesus in the church, and he served others, those that needed help, those on the margins, those that people just turned away to and said, you have no dignity, so let's treat you poorly. Boys and girls, let us follow the example of guys like Peter Claver and many others who kept their eyes on Jesus. They became disciplined in the spiritual life, serving God and others, so that we can be more and more like Jesus.